Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello, and thank you for watching.
For the past few weeks, Central Square has played host to public property as that we have a Tragedy of the Commons issue saying Happy Holidays, Keene.
Voluntary interactions where individuals are free to act so long as they don't initiate force.
This morning, we gather to remember Sergeant Tom Ball.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Johnny Ray.
And I'm Allie Havens. In local news tonight, unnamed members of the Keene Police Department shot and killed a man around 10 o'clock Tuesday night.
This was after 3 men were suspected of attempting to burglarize Diversified Computers on West Street in Keene. 2 of the men were arrested and charged with attempted burglary.
The third burglar suspect, Julio Angel de Jesus, fled the scene in a reportedly stolen Mercedes. After a short chase by the police of the suspect, de Jesus parked the vehicle near the police station and fled on foot.
But according to news outlets, de Jesus managed to make his way back to the Mercedes and attempted to drive away again. An unnamed member of the Keene Police then shot the suspect in the neck, fatally wounding him. De Jesus' death has been labeled a homicide.
Specific information pertaining to the legality of the shooting, such as whether or not the suspect was armed, has not been released by authorities. Information about de Jesus' past criminal history in New Hampshire, however, has been reported. Just 3 months ago, de Jesus was released from New Hampshire State Prison on parole, according to the State Department of Corrections. He had been held in prison for years for participation in the illegal heroin drug trade.
Joining us to give an editorial about this topic is Ademo Freeman, co-founder of Cop Block. Cop Block is focused on police accountability and governmental transparency.
Welcome to the show, Ademo.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It is a sad situation we've had here in this past week in Keene, but as some folks have focused on the police aspect and others have focused on the actual burglary, I'd like to kind of tie it all together and take a good look at it. The police here, or anywhere, I guess, claim to serve and protect people. And in this instance, if you look at it from the whole picture of the initial robbery to the horrible death of an individual, you find a lot of holes to where this might not have been the case. First, police respond in a very aggressive manner. This probably, driving fast to a scene, using sirens, startles and makes people panic. Then, when they get to a scene, they see people fleeing and they immediately get into this, let's go get this guy mentality. When in reality, if we would just look back, this is Diversified Computers. Just so happens to be in a strip mall next to a bank. There are probably lots of incidences where the police could have used the mobile, the bank, fingerprints, forensics to track down these people. The need to create a more dangerous situation, and I say more dangerous than burglary. I mean, stealing at a business where nobody, it's not armed robbery with a bank robbery with guns and there's actual...
Well, shooting at the man in the middle of, like in the middle of town, opening gunfire on a guy who's fleeing in a car when the state prison already had all his information. We already know, or they already say that he's from from Massachusetts. They have had him in prison for years, so they already have all his background information. They know who this guy is, and they had suspects that were detained. So it wouldn't have been so hard to track this guy down, but instead the police kind of endanger the public by shooting at this guy in the middle of the night.
Exactly, and to me this is an escalation of increased violence by the police. Again, due to the nature of their employment and their employer being the government. But you're exactly correct. They go to, at a certain extent, to I got to do what's ever right to get this. We had our own Free Keene blogger, Ademo Freeman, chased down by a cop to serve him a no trespass order. This is extremely violent behavior for any individual who's not wearing a badge, to chase somebody down with a car. That's what we would call this. But when he does it, he was only doing his job or trying to protect and serve the community. And as you brought up, I was just trying to make that point where if armed robbery is definitely wrong, but these men were trying to sneak, be sneaky and break into a place that was closed. They got caught, they ran, and the police are the one who brought violence to the community. The police are the ones who...
Well, the burglarizing is technically violence, wouldn't you say?
I do. I agree with that, and stealing is absolutely wrong. I'm just saying that if violence shouldn't be answered with violence, at least not in an area like you pointed out where, you know, if they're shooting at people, or at somebody, what's behind them, what's around them? Is there somebody in this building next door? High-speed chase through town, or maybe even not a high-speed chase, but someone's trying to flee. They're probably not doing it slowly.
Right.
So, you know, these are all things that increase danger. Of course, these men damaging someone's property and did harm to one area. But I think if the police had thought about it for a second, seen the car fleeing and said, okay, there's cameras around, there's fingerprints, let's stay here, secure the area, make sure no one's around, this is, you know, and let this man drive off, we'll most likely be able to catch him. And in that case, keeping everyone safe. The property would have been still secure, the community still would have been safe. It's not like these guys would have just went next door and started robbing somebody after being startled by anybody.
Instead, what they did was they chased him, and the guy apparently somehow fled on foot, but I've never heard of this. Fleeing on foot from police who were chasing, and then he somehow makes it back to his car, which was in front of the police station, so I'd assume that there would be other police available to like keep the car from the guy getting right back into it and running away again.
Yeah, doubling back probably isn't the best idea. You would think that there would be a cop car there, but who knows if he just doubled around the house and went back. But the point of that detail I like to point out is that if he did run from the car, which seems to be a clear fact, and then returned to it, he must have lost them, doubled around or around a house and came back. That perceives to me that if I were in that situation, I would be ahead of them, and then I'd be driving away. And if that's the point where he got shot, why are the Keene Police shooting people driving away from them? You know, I can't help but suspect, covering all the police brutality stories I have over the last couple of years, when officers have shot people using vehicles as weapons, they are coming near them. Now, sometimes that's questionable, but what isn't is the fact that they bring it up in the press releases right away. Our officers were threatened. He was using the vehicle as a weapon. No mention of this, not in the press releases, not in officers I've talked to in the streets or walking around town.
Or no evidence known to us if he even had a weapon at all besides his vehicle.
Exactly. I mean, you do see in police, they carry all these big, glorious weapons and stuff, but yet a pencil or a pen, you know, from a student who was once tased in a school. Well, he had a weapon. He had a pen. Everybody has a pen in school. So who knows what they would consider a weapon. So if they say he does have a weapon, I wouldn't necessarily throw him into the guilt. I mean, if he had a weapon of the same quality of the police, he probably would have used it sooner, since he was in a, you know, this man's been to prison. He probably doesn't want to go back. He knows he's facing a lot of time.
Do you think the New Hampshire House of Corrections has done a good job at correcting De Jesus before his demise?
Well, that's a great point that you bring up, because I wanted to focus on it too, is what is the underlying reason for burglary? And commonly, a large percentage, there are skewed numbers all over the place, so I don't want to misquote anything, but of robberies, break-ins are drug-related. And obviously this man has a history of drugs, so I can only, again, assume.
Or heroin, which is a very serious drug.
It is a very serious drug, but I'm assuming that he's creating this break-in, this violence against this individual at the store to you know, solve his drug addiction problem and or make money. Again, if we would end the war on drugs, then he may have never been in prison in the first place. He wouldn't be in this dire need, possibly, to, you know, he probably can't find regular employment due to the fact of his extensive criminal history and time in jail.
Right, he might be seeking help for his problems instead of burglarizing people.
Exactly, or he could be productive in some sort of trade that a select few group of individuals deem illegal.
Well, thank you, Ademo, for coming by. It's always good to have you on.
The Connecticut River Valley has been a hot spot for violence lately. According to Vermont's WCAX3, in the last 2 weeks, there have been 6 death investigations with 10 people killed and 2 others wounded.
WCAX reports that a man was allegedly run down by a car in Claremont, New Hampshire on April 7th.
On April 12th, 2 people were killed and 1 wounded in a murder-suicide in Dalton. The next day, 1 man was shot and killed while another was wounded in Chesterfield.
On April 17th, a man was shot to death in Lancaster, and a burnt truck was found with 2 more bodies.
On the same day, Keene Police killed a robbery suspect. The latest news comes out of Springfield, New Hampshire, where 2 bodies were found in a shed.
With all the deaths come many unanswered questions and many open investigations. We will give you more information about these incidents as we come upon it.
April 20th is a day celebrated by marijuana users and advocates. Many rallies and demonstrations took place all over the world, and New Hampshire was no different.
Free Keene TV producer James Schlesinger and I were in Concord Friday to cover the rally in front of the State House. Hi, I'm Allie Havens. I'm at the 420 rally in Concord, New Hampshire, and I'm here reporting for Free Keene TV.
We smoke these in remembrance of lost liberties, and it hopes for a day when the people do not fear the government because the government fears the people.
So I'm here at the 420 rally in Concord, New Hampshire, speaking with a participant. Hi, what's your name and where are you from?
My name's Trisha Brown. I'm from Exeter, New Hampshire.
Why are you here today?
Because I think marijuana should be legalized. It would decriminalized for the general public, anyone over 18, anyone who's not a felon or a violent criminal. And I think it should be legalized medicinally for people with chronic pain issues, chronic nausea, cancer, HIV, anything like that.
What do you think is easier for kids these days to obtain, cigarettes, alcohol, or illicit drugs?
I would say cigarettes and alcohol are probably always going to be easy to obtain because they're legal and a lot of people use them and abuse them. But prescription medications, I mean, I go to high school and I know that prescription medications are easier to obtain than marijuana.
My name is Doug. I live in Milford, New Hampshire.
And how do you feel about the current drug laws?
I think they're absolutely insane and ridiculous. It's absurd. Our U.S. government is paying the Netherlands tons and tons of money so that the Netherlands police can arrest Americans over there for smoking weed. That's a recent development. And this is what the United States is doing. They're throwing money out, you know, instead of doing what the people in our own country desire and want. You know, it's about time the representatives start looking at what the people want. Either that or they should be kicked out because they're not obeying the Constitution. I gotta say this, please, I've always wanted to say this. What about all you Christians out there? What the heck is with you guys? Christians. You know, it says in the Bible, God gave man all seeds and plants. It didn't say in the Bible, oh, but let your electors decide what you can do with what I gave you.
So about 10 minutes ago, the entire group that was down on the sidewalk of the State House, led by Rich Paul, after he gave a speech on the bullhorn, led a group of people up to basically the steps of the State House here, and people are meeting, people have signs. There's even a little agorist opportunity happening towards the center, and munchies are being sold.
I currently am the chairman of that national party.
Seems there's an entrepreneurship going on. Bo Davis, how you doing today?
Great. Just out here to enjoy the 420 rally and all the people coming out here peacefully disobeying bad laws. And I just wanted to make sure they all their thirst was quenched and their hunger pains were gone. So I feel like I'm helping out.
The community is definitely benefiting by your little opportunity here.
Well, yeah, I seem to be. I'm not monopolizing the situation or anything, but just nobody else is competing. I've got all kinds of chips and cookies and ice cold water, and even got some gifts and stuff like that, like these really cool 50 caliber bowls. They're going for 25 a piece.
I'm Dale. I live in Manchester now. I've lived in Keene some, and I moved here as part of the Free State Project.
Well, I was noticing your shirt, and it looks like you support an end to prohibition. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that however you feel about drugs and the harm that may come from them, prohibition is a horrible way to try to address that problem. And I think marijuana prohibition in particular is absurd because of all the drugs out there, probably one of the least harmful.
So how do you think the problem of drug addiction should be addressed?
I think there are a lot of things that can be done that don't have to involve violence, particularly government violence, and that's how I see the prohibition laws. I think education, and honest education. The problem with a lot of prohibition-based education is demonizing drugs in a sort of blanket fashion without recognizing the fact that they're all different and that there are different risks associated with different ones, and there are risks associated with using them without understanding what that entails and how they're different. And so I think education is a big step, honest education. There's a lot of marijuana demonization in the past was so off in terms of reality and the reality of the drug that a lot of kids, I think, and just young people in general, heard these things, found them out to be untrue, and then they don't trust anything they hear anymore about drugs, when in fact some of those, there's some really dangerous drugs out there that frighten me quite a bit, frankly, but I don't see the way to deal with that as prohibition.
What do you think of the DARE program, which is a program that's been in public schools for years?
I think they're some of the biggest culprits. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, where I've seen really bad information being put out there, has come from DARE, because their goal seems to be to just propagandize, to scare tactics that aren't necessarily based in reality. There may be some good information mixed in with the bad information, but it all gets poisoned at that point when you lie about some things just to scare people away from doing drugs. End it. I think work toward ending drug prohibition and acknowledge that I partake of very few substances myself, very mild nicotine, alcohol. I don't smoke pot anymore. I've got my pro-pot t-shirt on right now. I think this is originated in Keene, where they had rallies on a regular basis, and I thought that was a great idea.
Why do you see it of value to come out to a rally to support the legalization or decriminalization of a drug which you do not even use?
Because the drug war itself is harmful to everyone. You don't have to be a drug user to realize how harmful it is, that it's destroying families. You have our prisons are overloaded with people who haven't victimized anybody, and a lot of these people in prison are parents who are not there to support their children, and their children are more likely to get in trouble and get involved in crimes later. They don't have the family support that they deserve, and so there's harm to everyone, whether you use any of these drugs or not.
So this has been sort of an annual thing, and in years past the number of people ranged as high as 500 by some estimates. This year the number of participants were roughly 100. The event ended with the Shire Choir singing anti-drug war sung to the tune of popular Christmas songs.
The war on drugs is a war on people. We have a couple of videos to show you that help to better illustrate the absurdity of modern prohibition.
This video comes from learnliberty.org.
Here are three of the most bizarre, strange, and frankly unbelievable kind of reasons that have been given for prohibiting the sale and use of drugs. The war on drugs, contrary to what many people believe, has been going on for a long time. The very first International Anti-Drugs Conference was actually called by no less a person than the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II. Maybe that's why so many people involved in this campaign want to be called Tsars, although you'd think they would remember what happened to him, and maybe not be quite so keen to have that title. Now, over the years, a whole number of reasons have been given for sustaining the war on drugs, for extending drug prohibition and the like. Many of these are so preposterous to any sane person's ideas that you wonder how on earth they ever got credence. One argument which was made, for example, for banning opiates in the United States in the 1890s, and which was also made for banning the sale of cannabis in the 1930s, was that it would lead to miscegenation. The idea was that the drugs in question were going to be taken by respectable white girls and turn them into sex-crazed maniacs who would then want to have sex with Chinese people or Mexicans. Apparently, nothing could be worse. Another constant theme or idea was that the drug business, the trade in drugs, if you will, was part of an international conspiracy run by all sorts of nefarious interests. These interests varied from one period to another. On some occasions it was the international communist conspiracy, on other occasions it was the Yellow Peril, on yet other occasions it was a worldwide conspiracy of aliens and lizards. particularly the British royal family, who, as we all know, are in fact lizard-shaped aliens with a bad human disguise. The third kind of popular reason which is often given is the idea that somehow drugs are going to make their users into idle, unproductive layabouts who want to do nothing else in life except have a good time, and particularly, again, of course, have lots of sex. Now, the argument here, you might say, is a bit more plausible, except that you do have to wonder what the assumptions are behind it. The basic notion is that your life belongs to the government, and it's your job to be productive. It's your job to be basically the kind of person who never really wants or tries to have a good time, certainly not a good time involving mood-altering substances. And so the notion here is that in fact what you should be doing is simply avoiding any kind of temptation at all possible. And you do wonder in this case why these arguments are not applied to other kind of areas of life. But let's not give the people who make these arguments any more ideas.
For our last video, we'll be looking at the cost of the war on drugs. Once again, economics comes into play, as it usually does. This video is from the Foundation for Economic Education. Take a look.
The cost of the war on drugs. Does it make sense to decriminalize drugs? Decriminalization of drugs would reduce state and federal deficits by eliminating expenditures on prohibition enforcement, including arrests, prosecutions, and incarcerations. At an approximate cost of $22,000 per prisoner, in 2009, the federal government spent $2,094,510,000 housing drug-related prisoners. Of the 14,209,365 total arrests in the United States in 2007, 13% were as a result of drug prohibition. That's like putting almost everyone in Hawaii and Alaska in prison. If drugs were decriminalized, the government would save $25.7 billion in state and local expenses and $15.6 billion in federal government expenses annually. How is the federal tax money spent on the war on drugs? In 2008, federal expenses reached $15.6 billion. $3.4 billion was used to fight marijuana. $7.1 billion was used to fight cocaine. $1.24 billion was used to fight heroin. $3.9 billion was used to fight other drugs. Every 19 seconds, someone in the U.S. is arrested for a drug violation. 82% of these arrests are for possession alone. The total number of federal inmates convicted in 2009 was 187,886,000. Of that, 95,205 were convicted for drug-related charges. About 51% of federal inmates are a direct result of a drug conviction. 47% of Americans over 12 admitted to using illegal drug.
We've turned the corner on drug addiction in the United States. Drug addiction in the United States is under control.
After 40 years fighting the war on drugs, it's easier to buy marijuana than it is to buy a beer, according to a national survey of teenagers. Our legal system is completely overburdened. Nearly 4 out of 10 murders, 6 out of 10 rapes, and 9 out of 10 burglaries go unsolved, according to the Department of Justice. Over 35,000 people have been killed in just 4 years due to the violence related to Mexico's fight with their massive Mexican drug cartels. Violence, which is now making its way across the border into the U.S. Pat Buchanan of MSNBC once said, "How does one win a drug war when millions of Americans who use recreational drugs are financing the cartels bribing, murdering, and beheading to win the war and keep self-indulgent Americans supplied with drugs? There are 2 sure ways to end this war swiftly: Milton's way and Mao's way. Mao Zedong's communists killed users and suppliers alike as social parasites. Milton Friedman's way is to decriminalize drugs and call off the war. Americans are never going to adopt the Maoist solution, for the users of drugs are all too often classmates, colleagues, friends, even family. Indeed, our last 3 presidents did not deny using drugs." Find out more about the economics behind the war on drugs, the free market, and the principles of a free society at fee.org. Fee TV.
So those were a bunch of statistics, and For me at least, I know sometimes statistics can go right over my head, but if you really look at the numbers, it can be astonishing. I even heard that something like 1% of the population is in prison. When you look at the numbers of people that are in prison for drug crimes in which there's no victims, it's pretty astounding. And to some people, they might say that that is actually a good thing, because it's better to have those people in prison than out in everyday society who knows what they could do. But you have to consider, even those people need to consider how much they're willing to spend to pay for these their living expenses, their medical expenses that they procure in jail. I mean, they're basically paying for those people to stay alive in jail, where in society they might have to decide between their drug of choice and maybe going on to doing bigger and better things to actually help themselves and produce things for others. So it's another way to sort of look at the drug war as nanny statism, in the sense that it's requiring people, the productive sector of the economy, to basically keep afloat unproductive sectors of society that would normally go under. Also, just looking at the different incentives behind the drug war, the prison industrial complex, I mean, these are private prisons. They're making a ton of money on all these drug convictions. Police departments get federal funding and cool new gear to try to help them fight this drug war, which they've been terrible at actually, lessening the number of people using drugs and experimenting with drugs. Something like 70% of the American people disagree with this war. So why does it go on? Why do the people in government not listen to the people they supposedly represent, who are telling them, please end this war? It's tearing people apart, it's pitting people against each other, and it's increasing gang violence and helping cartels and drug dealers. They don't listen because, well, they don't have the incentive to listen. They only have the incentive to stand behind the pharmaceutical companies, the prison industrial complex, and just all the people that want to control other people's lives, even though they have no real right to. But thank you for watching Free Keene. Please send any emails to tv@freekeene.com. I'm Allie Havens, and have a good night, Keene.